Strategists must accept that they will never have the full picture, all the information, or the complete spectrum of foreseeable events. The development of strategy requires the courage to accept uncertainty. As the French have said, strategy is the art of conducting war not by means of coup d'oeil, that is to say, not by just looking at what's ahead from behind your horse's ears.
It's remarkable how few strategies actually work their way down to really finding where that competitive advantage will be.
For example, Steve Jobs, the Rolling Stone products. Came back to Apple, came up with some idea. Before him, they were still struggling with Macintosh. But he had a different idea. But only he could have negotiated with Mick Jagger to download their products, Rolling Stone products, onto iPod. In that first instance, made other musicians to follow suit.
The only way to improve it is just to follow and then to understand why your intuition, because intuition is a combination of your experience, of your determination, it's a part of the character. Why you fail or succeeded.
IKEA has a strategy today. It's very clear. Never been in an IKEA store. You need 15 minutes to know what the strategy is, right? You just walk in and you can see what's going on. It's a very startling, clear, simple strategy, but it didn't come overnight.
The name of the game is to think differently. And innovation is all about your own thinking, your own feel for what the customers will take.
Industries are very different today than they were 30 years ago. We're much more global, there's different technology, things move at different speed, but actually the same five forces still determine profitability. It's still the power of the customer, the power of the suppliers.
But uncertainty is not a product of not having complete information. It's a question of constant change, disruptive change, the result of frameworks and paradigms constantly rewritten by all players and not necessarily playing the same game. This new reality we could define as liquid, following Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. A new and unprecedented setting with social forms and institutions that no longer have enough time to solidify and serve as frames of reference for long-term plans.
As a CEO, you have to explain to the organization why these inconsistencies exist, because they require different expertise, different talent, different management orthodoxy, therefore different rewards.
I'd say that the boundaries of industries can certainly evolve and shift and change. I'm not sure that they're not clear. At any given point in time, by thinking about fundamental economics, we need to draw a set of boundaries at that moment. And so what we called a phone before is that industry definition is probably now a broader definition.
Because everybody can collect this data. You can look at these computers and we all have access to the same information. You can't win on being 1 second ahead of me and just receiving maybe in the stock market, but again, it's a minimal win.
Like IKEA with 15 years of learning to get to its business model.
Core business is 95% knowledge. New business is 95% assumptions. So you've got to set up a different rewards for a venture which is 95% assumptions than a venture which is 95% knowledge.
Such lack of certainty requires not only courage, but flexibility, adaptability, resilience. To be constantly ready and willing to change not only tactics, but strategy on short notice. To abandon commitments and loyalties without regret, and willingly overtake others to be ready to pursue opportunities according to their current availability and not to expectations.
You can't improve your intuition unless you rely on it. You can lose time and again by being proactive and by trusting your intuition. What I believe that in the modern world, not doing it will almost guarantee that you'll be on the losing side.
If you look at the sudden death of corporation or industry today, most of these companies and industries have ignored the early signs of major change.
I think in some sense everything has changed. But at least from my point of view, very little has changed in the sense that the enduring fundamentals of industry structure and the value chain and the importance of price and cost in determining superior performance, the distinction between operational effectiveness and positioning.
It is a requirement inside GE that they have to say, what are you doing to position yourself for the future? What are you doing to shore up the present? It has become a language inside GE, the way they talk, the way they behave, they will allocate resources.
Strategic planning in that sense, and thinking that you're going to be able to predict what the world will be like in 3 years and base your business on it, that's no longer true.
It's wrong for business schools to be teaching the framework, because then the new students will always learn the framework first and start thinking about the strategy with that framework.
Listen, forgetting. Because box 2 is about forgetting. Box 3 is about creating. Creating the future. The 3 boxes being, box 1 is manage the present. Box 2 is selectively forget the past. And box 3 is create the future.
Today, decision makers must strategize, act, plan, and calculate the likely gains and losses of acting or failing to act under conditions of endemic uncertainty, ever-growing discontinuities, permeating boundaries, and on equally uncertain chains of events generated by a dynamic and thinking array of opponents. Those strategists able to distinguish, anticipate, domesticate those subtle transitions will certainly maintain a tangible advantage. The inherent uncertainty embedded in strategy is one of the primary reasons why so many business leaders cling to the tangible world of tactics and operations. Tactics and operations offer a safety blanket and a paradoxical excuse, easier to control, less sensitive to outer influence, compatible with blind compliance. They are the perfect explanation for those who worship execution, those who desperately need to write done under the status heading of their action plan. They are the perfect alibi for those leaders with an overwhelming urge to win and an even more restless call that relentlessly rejects the mere chance of losing. But beware, execution is strategy. Without implementation capacity, there is no fulfillable strategic intent. That's why the outcome is included in its definition. Porter Dixon, strategy is finding a different way to compete, to create a different sort of value for the customer, which allows the company to prosper, to achieve sustainable profitability.
Any company, when it competes, is simply conducting a lot of activities, marketing activities, procurement activities, service activities, and so forth. And the value chain provided a framework for understanding how a particular company was competing versus its competitors, and therefore sharpening the distinctions in terms of its position.
The entrepreneur can start out with an idea, a brilliant concept, but with time, as a company achieves any volume at all, it's going to probably have to have a thought out and spelled out.
When you decide on your strategy, you still have to implement it. And here intuition is crucial.
Same thing with strategy and structure. You don't start fresh with strategy. You start, unless you're creating a new company, you start with the existing structure. So structure influences strategy, even if it needs changing, and strategy.
Human beings by nature are imaginative and innovative. Think about it this way. Suppose somebody put me in this room. After about half an hour, because human beings, we don't like boundaries. If somebody put me in this room, after about half an hour, I want to go outside. I feel constrained. Risk by definition, innovation by definition is an experiment with unknown outcomes. That means you are going to fail 9 out of 10 times. And if you don't reward people for failure, then they start doing the safe things.
Just as Pandolfini, Vijay Govindarajan, an expert in strategy and innovation, believes that strategic transformation won't result from 1, 2, 3 quick moves, no matter how impressive they may look. Leaders have to get the drivers of the expected transformation embedded, institutionalized in the organization, so that change arises naturally in every decision at all levels, naturally and repeatedly, as it becomes the intuitive response of all decision makers. That's the only way strategic positions can be built and sustained, and strategic power increased, so that there is no chance of successful defense or counterattack left. Remember, in chess, in war, in business, trying to win a game in the fewest number of moves suggests that you are underestimating your opponent as practically incompetent, putting all your efforts on the short term, playing on the safe side of quick returns, underutilizing your organization's talents.
After I won the title, it was a big celebration, of course. I got this laurel, and everybody was smiling. I was thrilled by this success. Age 22, the youngest world champion ever, and one of the persons who approached me was Rona Petrosian. She was the wife of the former chess world champion Tigran Petrosian, and she said something that stunned me. The young man, she said, I was sorry for you, and I stared at her because it was least expected at that moment, and she continued, I'm sorry for you because the happiest day of your life has just passed. The bad news, she might be right. She might have been right, but the good news for me that at least I got a new goal to prove her wrong.
The biggest advice I gave is, if you really want to have innovation, you got to create the culture. Because if you don't create the culture, innovation doesn't thrive.
Whole Foods, that is in the business of, it's a grocery store, but it's all about natural, fresh, locally grown, sustainable agriculture. And they've really made that what they stand for. And that isn't attractive to every customer, but there's quite a few customers that really buy into a concept that's good for the environment and that's supporting the small family farms.
The recent example, in my view, is Steve Jobs. It's a person who doesn't stay with his success. So he doesn't stand still. So he always wants to move ahead, and it's trying to hit the market with new products. So he doesn't want to be hit by the competition, and he wants to be always keep an innovation edge.
Had the PC and Windows OS not penetrated to the extent, they couldn't have done it. If Macintosh were the only PC in the world, they couldn't have had the success of iPod.
We can look at the list of those who are trying to be also always innovative, but unfortunately the majority is trying to be conservative.
Reasons for that reluctance may vary. Sometimes the hindering factor is corporate culture or legacy. Some other times, a discouraging context.
So that's why we're not seeing a lot of, the breakthrough inventions. If we look at the history of greatest technological innovations over the last 30 years, they didn't come from luxurious boardrooms, mainly from garages or dining rooms. So where people created things that eventually took over the market.
Yeah, I've written a number of books about strategy. I think my first really major book on strategy was a book called Competitive Advantage, and I think the really major message of that was really how to look at the industry in which you compete and how to think about what causes industry profitability and how, by understanding that, a company can improve its own position. In that book, I introduced the so-called 5 Forces framework.
Can you come up with a framework for Kindle strategy? It's very difficult to do so. There's no sort of example like this. Yeah. For Nintendo DS and Wii, there's no sort of framework.
I've always focused not on the specifics of how a particular industry operates or a particular company competes. I've always been looking at really the deep fundamental underpinnings of competition.
iPod has eliminated CD rental, etc., or even CD sales, and pretty soon we'll see a major problem of bookstores with the Kindle-like products spreading through the world. And therefore, there are signs of change, but most of these industries and also companies, established companies, have ignored the early signs.
It's not because they don't understand the technology. It's not because they don't understand the market. It's not because they don't understand the customer. It is typically a leadership failure.
Once again, people come first. Let's keep on stressing the triple connection we've been exploring while delving into the complex makings of strategy. Lawrence of Arabia developed in his 1926 work, The Seven Pillars of Wisdom, one of the first theories of guerrilla warfare. He said the secret was to operate like a cloud of gas, inactive and invisible most of the time, reliant on dispersion and mobility for success. The same could be said of strategy, which should be spread and well known to everyone in the organization. And the same could be said of the leaders responsible for its implementation. The guerrilla spirit helps them free themselves from the sweet chains of patronizing tactics. Against the controversial expression in chess, play the board, not the man. When you play the game of business, if you want to be strategic, distinctive, unique, the rules of engagement change. You play the man.